The longer you carry abandonment wounds, the harder relationships may feel. Most people begin experiencing abandonment wounds in early childhood, often without realizing it. These wounds then follow us into adolescence and early adulthood. You can be high functioning, successful, and still carry an abandonment wound so deep it affects every relationship you've ever had. You might not even realize it's abandonment pain, but it lives quietly under the surface running the show. The abandonment wound is born from everything you needed as a child but never received. A healthy nervous system requires emotional safety, nurturing, attention, and warmth. When those core needs aren't met, you don't grow up feeling safe, you grow up learning to survive. Instead of developing in a secure environment, you adapt to emotional neglect by disconnecting from your needs. As an adult, this can show up as an inability to truly receive love. You might overgive, people please, or chase approval trying to earn the care and connection you were once denied. At the core, your inner child is still waiting to have those unmet needs fulfilled, no matter how many years have passed. An abandonment wound isn't just about someone physically walking away. It's the emotional pain that forms when your need for safety, presence, or emotional connection wasn't consistently met in your childhood. Over time, your nervous system learned connection isn't safe, love doesn't stay. Now, this wound embeds itself deep into the body, not just the mind. It becomes the invisible lens you see the world through, constantly scanning for signs that people will leave, reject, or forget you. As an adult, this wound can be triggered in subtle moments. Think about the time when someone takes too long to reply, when you are excluded from plans in a friend group or family, when you are seen as too much for needing reassurance. When your abandonment wound isn't healed, relationships stop feeling safe. They feel like survival. You might become overly attached too soon, not because you're needy, but because your inner child is terrified of being left again. Or you might constantly test your partner's love, pulling away just to see if they will chase, which helps to reinforce the idea that they care. Have you ever acted busy when you weren't, ignored a call, or delayed your reply just to see how they'd react? Maybe you made plans with friends or casually mentioned an ex, not because you cared about reconnecting with an ex, but to get a reaction from them. Here's what's really happening underneath. You are using distraction to avoid sitting with difficult emotions because self regulation feels hard in those moments. And number two, you might be unconsciously testing your partner, trying to provoke a reaction to feel reassured that they care. Because a reaction is a form of reconnection. It might look like manipulation, and in some ways it is, but beneath that is a wounded inner child craving safety, to be seen, chosen, and held. And in those moments, whatever brings a glimpse of reassurance doesn't feel wrong, it feels essential because at the core, you're just trying to survive, just like your younger self once did, doing whatever it took to feel safe. When you carry a deep abandonment wound, conflict doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels life threatening. Even minor disagreements can trigger a surge of fear. Are they going to leave me? Your nervous system goes into survival mode, and you may find yourself trying to fix things at any cost. Just like a child who hasn't yet learned the difference between right and wrong, your inner child takes over. desperately trying to avoid the pain of being abandoned again. You may struggle to set boundaries because deep down you fear being too difficult or too much. So you tolerate more than you should, hoping love won't be taken away again, which leads to resentment. Or you become the avoided one, cutting people off because they get too close. Not because you don't want love, but because intimacy feels like danger. Until this wound is healed, love will feel unsafe, and emotional closeness will either trigger anxiety or numbness. Hi, my name is Vinaraji. Welcome back to my channel. I am a certified trauma healing practitioner specializing in alternative healing methods that blend science-backed techniques like EMDR and hypnosis with a holistic somatic approach. Over the past few years, I've developed and refined a method that supports deep trauma healing in a rapid yet sustainable way. If you are navigating abandonment wounds, unresolved trauma, attachment issues, anxiety, or depression, this space is here to guide you toward profound transformation and emotional freedom. All information is available in this video description below, so feel free to connect with me if you would like more information. And let's dive into today's topic of what it's like to live with deep abandonment wounds. The longer you carry abandonment wounds, the harder relationships may feel. Most people begin experiencing abandonment wounds in early childhood, often without realizing it. These wounds then follow us into adolescence and early adulthood, life stages that are already emotionally vulnerable. Now, during this time, we begin exploring the world, developing autonomy, and forming new connections in friendships and romantic relationships. But when you carry abandonment wounds, you are entering these connections with limited relational skills or emotional safety. This makes every relationship feel riskier and every heartbreak more wounding. Each experience adds another layer of pain, reinforcing the belief that love equals loss. And by the time you reach your 30s, you may be carrying invisible baggage. And as this continues into your 40s, many find themselves battling depression, emptiness, or a deep sense of not belonging, not feeling loved, not feeling enough. But all these struggles started way back when you were younger. If you are navigating abandonment wounds, attachment trauma, or simply feeling stuck on your own healing journey, I want you to know that you are not alone. I've created a free Patreon membership called the Inner Safety Starter, a gentle space to begin exploring your healing journey at your own pace. If you are working through abandonment wounds and learning to feel emotionally safe in your body again, this free space is where you can start. And if you are ready to go deeper, I've also included access to powerful tools for reprogramming subconscious beliefs inside the paid membership. But first, come join the free tier. It's a beautiful first step toward reconnecting with yourself. Now, to share my own experience, my first encounter with neglect and abandonment began at the age of 12, right after my parents separated. My siblings and I moved in with my mother. So, as I remember, one day she took both of my siblings out to run errands while I was left behind with my grandmother. There was no clear explanation as to why I couldn't go along. I was just told to stay back. Hours passed and they returned after spending the whole day out. Now, the 12-year-old me couldn't understand why I had to stay home. It was my first time being left behind, and up until then, I had never experienced that kind of exclusion because my dad had always made sure all three of us were treated equally. No one was ever left behind. But suddenly, that dynamic has changed, and there was nothing I could do about it. Now, when they came home, I remember having a big emotional reaction. I cried. cried. I was overwhelmed by confusion, sadness, and this thing of just being excluded, not understanding why. Now, instead of comfort, I was shamed for being too emotional, dismissed as troublemaker, throwing a tantrum, and was even called crazy by the adults around me. Now, that was the first time I truly felt abandoned, and unfortunately, it didn't stop there. Over the years, the neglect continued and deepened well into my young adulthood, and each new experience was more hurtful than the previous one. When I finally began doing the healing work about 4 to 5 years ago, I met that 12-year-old version of me again that I had no memory of for a long time, who was angry, hurt, and still waiting to be seen. And that young version of me showed up in many interactions without me even knowing. I realized that every new experience of neglect only built on that first wound and intensified over the years. That unhealed part of me carried so much resentment and a deep craving to be chosen, so I tried to earn love by overextending myself, always being there for others, trying to prove my worth. And as you might guess, this pattern showed up in my romantic life too. I kept reenacting that same abandonment story, hoping for a different ending. It was painful and exhausting, and just like everyone else, I thought I was unlucky with relationships until I saw the truth that was holding me back. The longer the abandonment wounds go unhealed, the heavier they become, and the more they shape how you see yourself, others, and love. As I share this, I want to gently invite you to reflect on your memory from childhood or adolescence. Was there a time you felt deeply hurt because a need wasn't met? Maybe they forgot your birthday. Maybe dismissed something you were excited about. Maybe favored a sibling or simply made you feel invisible. Now take a moment, see if anything comes to your mind. Now ask yourself, have there been moments in your adult relationships where you reacted strongly, maybe even disproportionately, to something your partner did or didn't do? It's likely those reactions weren't just about your partner. They were echoes of that younger version of you who still feels unseen, unheard, or neglected. That emotional outburst, it's your inner child asking for what was never given. The abandonment wound doesn't just live in your thoughts. It's stored deep in the nervous system, often showing up as unexplained physical and somatic symptoms. Because this wound is tied to survival, the body stays in a hyper alert state, always bracing for disconnection or rejection. Now, here are some of the common ways abandonment wound can manifest in the body through chronic tension in the chest or your gut, digestive issues linked to anxiety, which is very common, tight jaw or throat constriction when trying to speak up. I know of many people who struggle with this. Difficulty breathing deeply when emotionally triggered, insomnia, or restlessness, especially after a conflict. This is very common for those with anxious attachment, a sense of heaviness, fatigue, or emotional numbness. Now, these physical symptoms aren't random. They are your body's memory of what it felt like to be emotionally unsafe, unseen, or rejected as a child. And that child continues to live in your adult body today. The nervous system learned to anticipate abandonment even when it is not happening. Of course, again, the symptoms aren't exclusive to abandonment wounds, but they often reflect the accumulation of unresolved trauma that is stored in the body. It's important to understand that abandonment wounds can range in severity from subtle emotional neglect to profound emotional and physical abandonment. Let's also very quickly look into abandonment wound and those with complex PTSD. Now, for children who grew up in a chaotic, emotionally unpredictable, or neglectful environments, witnessing violence, explosive parents, alcoholic parents, abandonment isn't just a fear, it becomes their reality. It becomes their baseline reality. Now, in CPTSD, this wound is chronic and developmental. It's not about one moment of being left, it's about repeated emotional absence, broken trust, and unmet core needs during formative years. And this kind of trauma teaches a child that love is not safe. Connection for them is unstable. They believe I must perform, I must please or withdraw to survive. My needs will not be met, so I must suppress them. As a result, the nervous system is shaped in survival mode, always scanning for danger, avoiding vulnerability, and bracing for abandonment, even in safe relationships. That's because the inner child becomes frozen in time, emotionally stuck in the age when the abandonment first occurred. Remember my 12-year-old story? As a result, they will never be a safe partner because they don't feel safe within themselves. When we carry deep abandonment wound, we don't just fear being left, we unconsciously recreate the very dynamics that hurt us, hoping for a different outcome. Now, this isn't self sabotage, it's the inner child still trying to rewrite the ending. Familiar pain feels safe, therefore, we often confuse familiar, safe. If love in childhood was conditional, distant, or inconsistent, we subconsciously seek the same patterns as adults, not because we enjoy the pain, because it feels known, it's predictable, almost like home. The inner child is still waiting. Deep down, the child in you still believes I can make this person if I can make this unavailable person love me, maybe I wasn't unlovable after all. Now, this is a reenactment of your earliest wound, the moment love was withheld, and your nervous system linked that experience to your self worth. You're not broken, you were just trained. You learn to chase, learn to fix people to prove your worth because once you had to. You weren't being loved for being you. You were loved for being easy, quiet, helpful, or perfect. That conditional love became your relationship blueprint. Unsafe love means home to the nervous system. Until this wound is healed, your body might reject stable, safe love as boring or too much because your nervous system still equates chaos with connection. It's not that you want pain, it's that your inner child is still searching for closure where they were hurt. The real work begins when you stop outsourcing your worth and start meeting your own emotional needs. That's exactly why I created the Neuro-Somatic Cellular Release Method, a gentle, guided approach that allows you to revisit old memories, unfreeze suppressed moments, and fully process the emotions stored within. It's designed to help you rewire deep rooted trauma patterns, reconnect with your wounded inner child, and finally offer yourself the love, safety, and reassurance you've always deserved. If you are ready to kickstart your healing journey, please feel free to connect with me. All the information you need is available in the description below, and I will see you again in my next video.